So today we're diving into, well, maybe the biggest question of all. Where did we come from? The material we're looking at explores two profoundly different answers. On one hand, you've got an idea rooted in the vastness of space, and on the other, an act of deliberate creation. Let's dig in.
I mean, this is a question people have been asking forever, right? Did life just bubble up from some primordial soup right here on our home turf? Or did the very first spark of life travel here from the depths of space?
When you get right down to it, you're looking at two huge possibilities: a cosmic accident or a deliberate design. We're going to look at both, and we'll start with a really fascinating theory that says we might not be from Earth at all.
Alright, first up, let's look to the stars. Our source material digs into a few scientific hypotheses that all point to this wild idea that the very first seeds of life on Earth actually came from outer space.
Okay, so the most general idea here is something called exogenesis. It's a pretty simple concept, really. Life didn't start here. It started out there, somewhere else in the universe, and somehow it made the journey to Earth.
Now, let's narrow that down a bit to panspermia. This is more specific. The idea is that tiny, microscopic life forms are actually all over the universe. They're scattered like cosmic dust, just floating around, waiting to land on a planet like Earth where the conditions are just right to grow. And that brings us to the most specific, and honestly, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie version of the theory: directed panspermia. The idea here is that this wasn't an accident at all. Some super advanced alien civilization intentionally sent out these life seeds to get life started on other worlds.
So you might be thinking, who on Earth would seriously come up with an idea like that? A real scientist? Well, get this. Our source points to one of the most brilliant scientific minds of the last century.
Yep, none other than Francis Crick, the guy who won a Nobel Prize for helping figure out the double helix structure of DNA. And what's really fascinating here, and our source points this out, is that Crick was a committed atheist, but his own discovery actually challenged his worldview.
And this really gets to the heart of the problem for Crick. As one of the guys who first understood the structure of DNA, he was just blown away by how incredibly complex it was. So complex, in fact, that he just couldn't wrap his head around how it could have possibly come about by pure chance and natural processes alone.
So you can kind of see his thought process here. The sheer complexity of DNA made him doubt his own beliefs, so he started exploring other ideas, like directed panspermia, as a possible scientific explanation. Now, our source does note that he later came back around to believing in natural evolution, but the fact that he even went there just shows you what a massive puzzle the origin of life really is. Okay, so if a guy like Crick, a Nobel Prize winner, was willing to even think about this stuff, what does the rest of the scientific community think? Let's take a look at the mainstream view.
Well, our source makes it pretty clear. Panspermia, in any of its forms, is way out on the fringe. It's just not a widely accepted idea in mainstream science.
So what is the mainstream idea? It's a concept called abiogenesis. And the basic idea is that right here on Earth, over millions and millions of years, non-living chemicals just kind of came together and eventually formed the very first living cells.
So why lean towards abiogenesis? Well, according to the source, it comes down to two big things. First, and this is a big one, there's just no actual evidence that life came from space. And second, it fits with a core principle of science called naturalism, which is the idea that we should look for natural explanations for things we see in the universe. Any theory that brings in an outside intelligence, well, that falls outside the rules of the game.
And this slide really gets to the core criticism from our source. The whole panspermia idea, it doesn't really solve the problem, does it? It just kind of kicks the can down the road or, across the galaxy. The huge fundamental question of how life got started from non-life is still just sitting there unanswered.
All right, so after walking through all that scientific debate, our source material takes a hard turn. It presents a totally different way of looking at everything, an explanation for creation straight from the biblical book of Genesis.
And it all starts with this one famous line from Genesis 1:1. But the source we're looking at presents this as more than just a statement of faith. It's seen as a complete, all-encompassing explanation for how the entire universe began.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The argument made in our source is that you can actually read this ancient verse as a scientifically precise statement about the creation of the universe.
Okay, look at this breakdown. The source basically maps every part of that sentence to a fundamental concept in physics. So in the beginning, that's time. God, that's the initial force. Created, that's energy. The heavens, space. And the earth, that's matter. The claim here is that this one sentence contains the 5 essential ingredients that science agrees you need to have a universe like ours.
And the whole point here is that these things can't exist without each other, right? You can't have matter if there's no space for it to be in. You can't have energy acting without time. So the source argues they all had to pop into existence at the exact same instant, a concept it claims is perfectly captured in that one single verse.
And this really brings us to the final word from this perspective. It's all about contrasting these shifting human theories with what's presented as a solid, unchanging truth that you can find in Scripture. So, when all is said and done, we've looked at 2 totally different ways of seeing our origins. On one side, you have theories trying to find answers in the natural workings of a vast, undesigned universe. And on the other, you have an answer found in the deliberate word of a creator God. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. Whether we see ourselves as a cosmic accident or a deliberate design, how does that belief about where we came from ultimately shape how we see our purpose, right here and right now?